with me, please. Holy and loving God, we ask that you come and you be with us now, and that you open our hearts and our minds to the movement of your Holy Spirit in this place. Open our hearts so that we may perceive your love. Stir in our spirits so that we may perceive your presence. Open our eyes so that we may see you in our midst. Come, Lord, be with us right now, we pray, in your holy name. Amen. Amen. So tonight, Tony read for us the parable of the talents. And I bet you're thinking, oh no, parable of the talents. That means it's stewardship month. And you'd be right, it is. However, the parable of the talents is one that I've always had a bit of a problem with. Because the way that it goes, as Tony read earlier, you've got the slaves that are given talents each, and they're asked to go out and use them, and the first one is given 5 and comes back with, and has made 5 more, and the master says, that's great, enter into my glory. And then the second one comes back and says, you gave me 2, I've got 2 more, and he says, well done. And then the last one comes back and says, I haven't got any. And the master says, you're worthless, out you go, out into the darkness where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. I love that, wailing and gnashing of teeth. Out into the darkness, and then says, you know, from those who have, more will be, for those who have, more will be given, and those who have not, even what they have will be taken away from them. And that's not the message that I find in the rest of the gospel. That's not the message that I find preached by Jesus. So I thought, right, it's about time I did some serious study and I have a look at this and try and work out what's going on. Well, first of all, I think that with this parable, there's this kind of quirk of linguistics going on, because we've got a monetary value which is called a talent. And then in English, the word talent means, you know, gift or ability or something that we're able to offer to others. So it's very easy to make the leap from talent, money, to talent, gift and time, etc. So then you can kind of twist it around and say, well, actually, what it's about the gifts and talents that God gives us, and what we need to do is use them in God's work, and that will please God. And I'm like, well, that's all very nice, but that's also not what I read in the gospel. That's not what Jesus is all about. So, is there something else that's going on? Well, firstly, I don't know about you, but probably because of the parallel parable in Luke, where it's called the parable of the pounds, or the parable of the miners. Miners as in little coins, not people who go down, you know, and dig holes and things. The parable of the miners. I always assumed that a talent was a small amount of money. And actually, when I kind of did my research and tried to work out where this came from, I realized it came from Monty Python's Life of Brian. Because in Monty Python's Life of Brian, heaven forbid that Monty Python might not be historically accurate, but in Monty Python's Life of Brian, then Michael Palin plays this person who runs out and says, have you got a talent for an ex-leper? A talent for an ex-leper? And the guy says, what do you mean ex-leper? He says, well, I was minding my own business, and this Jesus came along and healed me, so I'm now an ex-leper. Took away my business, he did. So it's... And I remember that and thinking, oh, so a talent is kind of like, it's a pound. It's a coin. It's a little, you know, it's a small amount of money. So when the master goes away and he gives the slaves a little bit of money, it's just basically just a little test. It's like, you know, see what you can do with this just to show your ability. You know, like you give kids pocket money and say, you know, let's see what you buy with it. It was that kind of thing. Well, a talent is 20 years' wages. So a talent in modern day money would be somewhere between 500,000 and £1 million. So the first slave is given £5 million. That changes the story a little bit. That changes the way that it runs. So I thought, well, let's play with this. And let's bring the whole thing up to date and look at it in a different context. So what I'd like to do is give you the parable back, but I'd like to change the context a little bit. And let's see how it comes out, and let's see whether we see something a little different in it. And before I do this, I'm going to mention Donald Trump. And before somebody sues me for libel, then what I'm about to tell you is a complete fabrication. It's not true, and I am not suggesting that this has actually happened. So, having said that, Donald Trump realizes he's going to be president. So he calls in 3 of his business managers and says, look, for the next 4 years, I'm not going to be able to run my business because running business is incompatible with being president. I'm not allowed to do both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over the mainstay of my business operations to you, and then when I come back in 4 years, let's see how you've done with it, and we'll go from there. And if you've done well, then I will reward you, because that's what I do. So the first chap comes in, and Donald Trump says, okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you my business portfolio, and it's worth 500 million. And what you do is that you buy companies which are struggling, companies which are having difficulties. You buy them, you break them up, you make everyone redundant, and then you sell the companies for the little bits of the company, because the bits of the company are worth more than the whole company. And that's how you kind of make your money. And if you think that people don't do that, then you never saw Pretty Woman, because that's exactly what the Richard Gere character in Pretty Woman was doing. He was buying big companies, breaking them up and selling them. So the guy says, okay, fair dues, I'll do that for you. So the next manager comes in, and Donald Trump says, okay, so I'm going to give you 200 million, and you're going to look after my investment portfolio, which is basically stocks and shares. Now, dealing in stocks and shares, if you have a pension or anything attached to stocks and shares, then you'll know that they are notoriously difficult to kind of work out what's going to happen next, because they do this all the time, and you're never sure what's going to happen next, unless you have some insider informants, unless you have somebody on the inside who can say, actually, the orange crop is going to be really, really good this year, which means that the company's stock is going to go through the roof. Or, if you can get out there through other people a bit of fake news about a company, then that will serve you just as well. Because if you manage to put out some fake news about a company that's not doing well, suggesting that it's doing very well, then you can buy shares at the going rate, which is quite low if the company's not doing well. And then once you put out the fake news that says company is going to go through the roof, suddenly all the shares go up because people buy it, and when it hits the top, you sell, and you make a fortune. Of course, what happens is people realize it's fake news, and it just trickles back down to where it was. But you've made your money. The other way around, of course, is exactly the same thing. You could put out some fake news that a company's not going to do well. So you could then lower the share price substantially. You then buy when the share price is low, and then you wait for people to work out that the fake news is just that it's fake news. It then comes back to its normal level, at which point you sell and you make a fortune. So that is the portfolio that the second business manager is given. Now the third, and by the way, if you think that people don't do that, then you've never seen the film Trading Places, because that's exactly what the 2 old guys in Trading Places do and get caught for at the end. So the third one comes in, and Donald Trump says, right, I want you to look after my real estate portfolio, which basically means I'll give you 100 million, and you go out and you buy what are difficult mortgages. So you can buy them at pennies on the pound. You can go out and you can buy a mortgage that somebody's taken out for 200,000, you might pay 20,000 for it, because it's kind of a dodgy mortgage and they want to get rid of it. Or what you could do is you could go out and you could find a family that are not doing terribly well and that are about to lose their home, and what you do is you say, look, I'll buy it from you. and I'll buy it for you for whatever the mortgage is, and then you can just pay the new sum to me, which of course will be lower. And then you make sure that you've got some small print, so that if they miss a payment or something goes wrong, you can then repossess. Because that's how you make your money. You don't make your money from interest on mortgages or interest on loans. You make your money by people defaulting, and then you grab their property. So basically what you do is you make money by taking homes off people. And again, if you think that doesn't happen, then you didn't watch Christmas Carol over Christmas, because that's exactly what Scrooge does. In fact, I remember he's having a conversation with Bob Cratchit on Christmas Eve, and he says, here's the evictions for tomorrow. And Bob says, but tomorrow's Christmas Day. And Scrooge says, okay, you can gift wrap them if you like. So that's the attitude that he has, because he's in it for the money, and he doesn't care whether or not the people are going to suffer. So exactly the same thing. The third business manager is given a portfolio of 100 million and told to use the real estate market to see what he can do. And he has a Scrooge moment. He has a Christmas Carol moment. He is visited by the three ghosts. He has an epiphany. We're still in the season of epiphany. He has an epiphany. He suddenly realizes what he's doing. He suddenly realizes that he's making money for this man who is making money out of people's misery, is making money off of people's difficulties and challenges and tragedies. And he thinks, I can't do this, because if I do this, I'm going to be like him. That's what I'm going to become. I'm going to become that. And it scares him. So what he does is he puts the whole lot to one side and says, you know what, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'll wait till he gets back. 4 years later, Trump comes back, calls the first business manager in. How do you do? And the business manager says, I did really well, actually. I took your 500 million, it's now $1 billion. I doubled it. And Trump says, well done. Now, you're going to come to the parties, you're going to be on the yachts, you're going to be part of the inner circle. I'm going to make sure you've got everything you need and make sure that you're taken care of. So the second manager comes in and Trump says, how did you do? And the second manager says, actually, I did quite well. I took your 200 million and I've made 400 million. So it's 400 million all told. I doubled your money. And Trump says, excellent. That's really good news. Now, what I'm going to do is invite you to the party, the golf club, the yachts. You know, you're going to be out there with everybody else. And you're going to be a name in business, because, you know, you're really worth something. Then the third manager comes in, and Trump says, how did you do? And he says, well, actually, I've realized who you are. You're Scrooge. You're the person that makes money off other people's misery. You are the harshest of people. You like to reap where you haven't sown. You like to gather where you have not scattered seed. You want to take advantage of other people's hard work. You want to take advantage of that just so that you can make money, regardless of how it affects them. And to be honest, it scared me, so I didn't do anything with your money. And Donald says, okay, well, that's pretty useless. If you'd known I was like that and you were frightened of me, surely you should have just put the money in the bank and then it would have gained some interest for when I got back. And the guy says, no, I wasn't afraid of you. I was afraid of becoming you. I was afraid of becoming like you. That's what I was afraid of. And Donald Trump says, get out. Go on. You're absolutely worthless. You're not worth anything. And he calls in the first business manager again and says, do me a favour. Focus on him. I want his house. I want his car. I want him taught a lesson. If he thinks he can do this to me, then I want him stripped of everything. If he thinks that he can just take me for a ride and not do what he's supposed to do. Because in this world, the rich get richer. And the poor have what they're given, have what they have taken away from them. That's the way this world works. That's the way everything is. Who's the hero in the story now? Is it the first two slaves? Is it the first two managers? Or is it the third one? Is the third one the whistleblower? It's a really interesting parable, this, because it's the one parable that Jesus doesn't start with, the kingdom of God is like. He just says, it is like. And what he's doing is talking about the world. He's not talking about how God is. He's talking about how the world is. In fact, if you carry on in Matthew 25, and you read a little bit further, suddenly it makes sense, because he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he'll sit on the throne of his glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he'll separate people from one another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And he'll put the sheep at his right hand and the goats on his left, and then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me." Everything the first two slaves didn't do. Everything that the master didn't do. Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it we saw you hungry? When was it we saw you and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when is it we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" The king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." This is in the context of the parable of the talents. Suddenly the parable of the talents takes on a completely different meaning. It's not about making money for God. It's not about using all our gifts and talents in a way that we think God would want, because otherwise we'd be punished. Rather, it's a lesson in the two laws. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second law is the same, because how do you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? You love your neighbour as yourself. It's that easy. And I think that that's what Jesus is saying in the parables. And that's very different to what I was brought up with. So primarily, stewardship is not how much we give to the church, although I'm very grateful for what you give to the church, because that helps us to operate, and we really do need that. But it's about how we treat people. It's about how we live our lives. It's about loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbours as ourselves. And occasionally, we find ourselves in the firing line, like the third slave, when we're the whistleblower going, "This is not right. This is not fair enough."